one for Talking Niagara. Sorry, for Spin Legal, but we spent money on it. Anyway, okay, welcome everybody to Talking Niagara this morning with me, Peter Giblett, and him, Dave Wheeler. Good morning, Dave.
Hey, everyone.
So we're here on, it's Thursday, the 9th of January, the first Thursday of our 2025 broadcasting season. And our talk show this morning is going to be discussing the news that's important to Niagara Falls. So first item on this list is, when are we going to get those $200 rebate checks? Right? Well, actually, no, let me rephrase that question. I've got to rephrase that question. When are we going to get those $200 vote for Doug Ford checks?
Yeah, really. Yeah, I'm Doug. I'm a really good guy. What about the $250 checks we're supposed to get from the feds? I think that's probably put on hold forever.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to be cynical about the purpose of these checks. Doug Ford made the announcement that he's thinking about Ontarians who have been facing harsh situations over the last little while, and which is why he's giving the $200 rebates out. Would have thought, though, that if you'd actually gave out rebates to those that were on lower income, higher rebates to those that were on lower income, that might actually readdress the situation.
Yeah, really. $400 instead of $200 for everybody. $400 for those in economic situations that are humble, to say the least. Anyone making any family making, I don't know, $70,000 or less, or whatever. Any individual making probably $50,000 or less, getting a $400 check instead of the rest of us getting $200 each. I think that would be
based upon last year's the last report that you did for your income tax.
Yeah, if we could do that, really, to give everybody $200. Yeah, well, that's just really buying somebody a beer on election day kind of thing. It's the same deal.
Well, that's what Washington
used to do in Ontario. In Upper Canada, they go around and give everybody buy beer at the pubs. That's why they started to close bars on election day back in the day.
Well, that was actually something that happened when Washington decided he wanted to stand for the Virginia, I think it is, isn't it? Yeah, Virginia legislative body. Basically, the first time he did it, he thought, why did I get no votes? And he looked around at what the ones who were successful did, and they all bought beers for local people at the bar. So next time, in that next election, he bought drinks for everybody at the bar and was more effective doing it than the pre-existing candidates.
Well, when I was down in the early '80s, '83, I was down in Prince Edward Island. And the people told me there that the candidates for any kind of religion would come or any kind of political post will come to your door, because PEI is pretty small, so they can go they can go see all their neighbors, and they'd always give everybody $2, a $2 bill. I mean, they just did, and you're not supposed to do that, but I mean, $2 even back then wasn't a whole lot, but that's what they would do. They would make sure everybody got $2. I guess they must have had an agreement among all the different candidates that $2 was the limit they could pay.
Maybe $2 was the bus fare.
Yeah, well, maybe, yeah.
Bus fare to the polling station,
Well, that would work if they had buses.
Well, yeah, I'm only trying to put a positive stance on it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, moving on. Canada is getting poorer, so says the CBC.
Oh yeah. Oh, this one goes back a ways, eh?
Yeah, well, and try. Remember, we're playing catch up this week. This week because we started with the first show of the week. Didn't do. We basically did 1.5 shows about off script. Off news, right? So I'm still just pulling these together and trying to put them in some form of order. I've got some other later, the ones we did later, early, pulled them forward. So we'll get to some of those. Right?
Where was it? Oh yeah, here it goes way back. Okay, yeah.
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 Basically, it's TBC one that says when compared to its wealthy peers, data is showing that we are losing ground compared to other nations.
Yeah,
We're among the richest nations in the world, but when compared to countries like Australia, New Zealand, UK, it isn't as rich as it once was.
no, the standard of living is going down quite a bit. And so I mentioned this the other day that Australia, the United Kingdom are better off than us, and the United Kingdom is not as good as uh, has less prospects than the poor state in the U.S., which is Mississippi, and New Zealand is a little country that's making ground on Canada and coming up close. This is and the wealth gap between Canada and the U.S. has only grown wider, according to the figures established by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development.
Yeah.
Canada's relatively weak growth, combined with a population boom, has hit its standing among the wealthy nations. And that population boom, of course, was designed to stave off economic recession. So the government brought in 1.3 million people in a year, hoping that the amount of new people coming into the country would start spending money, and that would
Yeah, but you see,
solve some of our economic woes. But of course, that didn't happen, did it?
well, what they get wrong on that is that when it comes down to it, if in the middle of a recession you bring in new people, you've got to start at the head of the chain in that regard. As to you don't bring new people into the country when you have no jobs available for them, right? Bringing new people doesn't create jobs. And that's one of the things that I think our government got wrong with it, right?
Yeah, the government is just too dumb.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sound like a broken record though, but they're not governing well. And
No.
and the things they do, okay, if we bring a whole lot of people into the country, then they'll spend money and that'll boost our economy. But you still have to produce things. And that is
Yeah.
the biggest problem here going forward. Like they've mentioned this constantly, but they're looking for band-aid solutions. Treasury Board President Anita Anand,
Yeah.
who is also MP, I think, also launched what she calls a working group to study the country's lackluster productivity and find ways to
Yeah.
boost economic output. The bank
Yeah. And
also
that's actually
seized on the issue.
that's
March,
actually a statement I wanted to focus on as well, because lackluster productivity has been a big, we've been talking about that for as long as this show has been going, the last 3 or 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah, Chrystia Freeland has mentioned that at least one time in great frustration as she sees the productivity going down. But how do you improve the productivity by bringing way too many people into the country? People who can't house, people who can't take care of in the health care. I mean, I am sounding like a broken record, but that is what is the problem. The Bank of Canada here, it also seized with the issue. In March, Deputy Governor Carolyn Rogers sounded the alarm about the need to boost Canada's productivity. Remember, she says, when it says break the glass, well, now it's time to break the glass.
Yeah.
on the alarms. You know, when you have an alarm and it says break
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
glass, well, she
Exactly.
says it's long overtime to break the glass. He
Yeah.
said, yeah, here's the quote here. You've seen those signs that say, in emergency, break glass. Well, it's time to break the glass.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the point being is that I've said for a long time, I think that where you've got organizations, where you've got where you've got companies that don't reinvest the profits, then we got problems, right? We need I'm loath to say that we should force companies to reinvest their profits, but hey, we should force companies to reinvest their profits.
No, you can't do that because that
I know
doesn't
you
work.
can't. I know.
That
You know where
absolutely
I'm
doesn't
coming
work.
from, though. You know where I'm coming from. I'm saying that out of frustration, not out of political need.
What was happening in Canada because of the unfortunate the economic outlook for Canada is so poor that Canadian businesses are not investing at all. And as a matter of fact, investment is leaving Canada and going into the States, mostly into the United States. So those companies that do exist and do have a fairly healthy future are not investing in Canada because they don't have the confidence in our economy. One of the problems with the Western oil and gas productions, which whether you like the environmental issues or not, is still extremely essential that the oil and gas do get produced, but they cannot invite any kind of investment to develop those resources, whether it's Canadian, American, or anyone else, because the investors are very, very uncomfortable with the government's position.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When they talk about reducing environmental gases and so on, the only solution they have is to reduce production. If your solution is to reduce production, that means that nobody's going to invest in you, because who would want to invest in oil and gas facilities if the government is forcing unreasonable environmental conditions on you, whereas just south of the border they don't have them? So where are you going to put your investment?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
And Mike Christmas says we need to refine our own oil, but unfortunately,
and
that's not the way it looks.
The important thing here, he said, is that if a product is sold in Canada, at least 65% should be made in Canada. And we were talking yesterday about, for example, there being 50 odd thousand components in a car. So he's talking about 65% of those components we should be dictating are made in Canada.
Well, yeah, including the Speedo.
Yeah.
But look, this, and this is a problem we've seen over and over and over again. It's a constant issue between Canada and the U.S. going way back, where we are so attached to them that we have to sort of move towards where the investments are coming. The investments in the Keystone Pipeline kind of thing, which was shut off by Biden, which was turned back on by Trump, shut down by Biden, and it'll probably be opened back up by Trump again. Those kind of investments where Canadian crude goes down to the Gulf of Mexico, soon to be called the Gulf of America, according to Trump. Idiot.
Yeah.
So well, God, I mean, why is that important? I just don't get it. Oh, idiot. Anyway,
it's not.
The fact is that they have the facilities to be able to refine that kind of oil, and they have major investments down there in refinery. That's why the Canadian crude was to be sent down that way, because those facilities down there have the ability to refine oil.
But Dave, there's one item in here further down that article that says the news isn't all bad. Data shows that real weekly earnings, a person's take-home pay, has actually increased in Canada, even accounting for inflation. And household savings rate is also up.
Well, those are signs, but what that means to me is Canadians are spending less. They're being forced to save. We've had way too many people on the edge. This is a tragic situation, basically, and I believe it's because of the unrealistic ideologies of the Liberals and the NDP coalition. Basically, they have these pie in the sky ideas of what they're going to do, and they're going to save the planet. And they're going to save the planet by bringing massive amounts of immigrants to Canada. They're going to save the planet by greenhouse gas emissions restrictions.
Well, I get that.
Unrealistic.
I get that. I get that element of it, but bringing people in doesn't save the planet.
No, well, they think they are. They think, well, we're doing everybody a big favor by bringing more and more refugees in, more and more immigrants in, more and more students. Now we're in a trap where our universities are super dependent on foreign students. So we reduce the amount of foreign students coming in. The universities have geared up to take on massive amounts of students coming in for the country, that kind of thing. It was just not thought out well, and the consequences of their actions are not thought out well.
Yep.
And we can see what has happened now when Trump has said they're going to get this tariff. So suddenly, all these things are getting done. Suddenly, our military expenditures are going to go back up. Suddenly, our border patrol facilities are going to go way up. And suddenly, guys like Ford and Alberta are making independent deals and trying to look attractive to the United States economically as a trade department, independently of Canada. Now, Ford and Daniel Smith have been the biggest voices for their provinces and have taken the lead in posturing Canada, and in this particular case, Ontario and Alberta's position. They're down there. They're in the TV shows. They're where's Trudeau? Where is the feds? They've got nothing right now. Apparently, the premiers want to get Trudeau and LeBlanc and everyone else in a room because LeBlanc is supposed to be head of the trade, the team that's going to go down and meet with the Americans.
There's no team.
What?
There's no team, is there?
Well, there's a team starting up, but they haven't met yet, and they want to get Trudeau and the others in a room to decide. I guess they're already beginning to decide how to counteract the tariffs in the U.S. with tariffs of our own. We may put tariffs on U.S. steel. We may put tariffs on U.S. aluminum. We may put tariffs on Florida orange juice. The tariffs that our team is supposed to come up with are tariffs that would hurt Canadians the least. And the one about restricting orange juice coming from Florida is a message to Trump because he comes from Florida. I'm not so sure. We'll have to see what kind of tariffs the U.S. will come up against Canada and kind of counterbalance them. The problem here, and the Chinese have mentioned this too, when you put on tariffs, it is not the Canadians or the Chinese that are paying the tariffs. The tariffs are paid by Americans. So if Americans are buying Canadian steel, the tariff on them is something that they pay 25% more. So until they find a different supplier, they'll have to pay 25% more for the steel that comes into Canada. That 25% is what they pay to buy Canadian steel or Canadian oil. It's not what we pay. So it's the consumer in the United States that has to pay more.
Well, and at the end of the day, yeah, the consumer pays more, but the consumer doesn't necessarily pay 25% on on everything that they buy just because it has Canadian steel in it. Remember, that may only make a 3 or 4% increase in price on one product that you buy.
Well, if an American industry has got to deal with Canadian steel and they put 25% tariff on Canadian steel, then then they will have to pay the 25%. So that
Yeah,
company,
they'll have to pay the 25%.
yeah, that company will be paying the 25% to the U.S. government. It wouldn't be Canadian. The only
I know.
How tariffs work is then to encourage them to buy things that are steel that would be produced in the United States if it is available.
Yeah, but you see, again, say you're putting together a product that has some Canadian steel in it, has some American steel in it, because there are differences between the two types of steel, but only 10% of that product that they're putting together has Canadian steel in it. Only 10% of the price will have a 25% tariff on it. And that's a balance that company has to make in terms of the pricing structure of that product, don't they?
Well, it will go to the American consumer. Let's say,
of course it will.
Now, if they put a tariff on, if we put a tariff on American steel, we have the capacity here with our steel mills to produce our own steel. So we won't. So we'll just stop buying it from the United States because we have an alternative. The United States has steel mills too.
Yeah.
But it's easier for them to buy some Canadian steels in certain sections.
Well, sometimes there's different.
Go ahead.
Sometimes there's different quality in that steel as well, isn't it?
Canadian steel has
different. Yeah.
It depends on what it's made for.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Stelco, for instance, makes a lot of steel for the automotive industry.
Of course.
Certain aspects, they can change the recipe to make surgical steel if they want to. They can change the recipe of the steel to match other things. Right now, Stelco makes mostly plate. If it's cheaper for somebody from Michigan to buy Canadian steel to put into the cars they're making there, then if they then have to pay 25% more for that and don't have an alternate somewhere in the States to buy that steel, then the consumer will have to pay for that.
Yep, exactly.
What it's trying to do is basically it's trying to dissuade American companies from buying the foreign goods. The Chinese have mentioned that over and over again. Like, you're kind of depending on cheap Chinese goods. If you put a 25% tariff on our T-shirts, then it's the consumers that are going to have to buy the T-shirts for 25% more. We're not losing anything if you keep importing it. So sometimes the tariff thing is unrealistic, but it will hurt us. It will hurt us a lot. If we were able to actually shut off the power, let's say if Quebec shuts off 25% of its power or 30% of its power going into the United States, that would hurt. If the U.S. puts what kind of tariff they want to put on it. When you have cheap electrical power coming from Quebec, and they may not put a tariff on that at all. They might leave that.
Mike makes the point the Welland Canal is a place to hit them because as American ships come through the Welland Canal, you can increase the price or make a charge on that. I'm not entirely sure how they pay for that.
That would also hurt Canadian industry, however, because the shipping usually isn't just.
I grant that. Yeah.
So they
you
may
can't
have
just hit U.S. boats. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Because they're stopping. Electric power is another place to hit the U.S. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically speaking, how we're going to fight this battle, I don't know. Donnie Bonespurs and his goons want to come up here and take over Canada, but I've got a really good solution to that.
No, actually, I've got an idea about that. Actually, they don't want to take over Canada. They want every chunk of land from South America, from the edge of South America, from Guatemala up to Greenland. They want to conquer everything that they have that under U.S. control.
Well, they already do, and that's the irony of it. They already do have that kind of control.
And the reason they want Greenland is because with the ice melting on the North Pole, Greenland natural resources are becoming more available, so they can now send in their trucks and dig them out.
Well, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because the United States had a very huge military base in Greenland, and they still do.
Yeah.
And when the Cold War was over, they pulled out resources, and now all of a sudden they say, okay, we got to own it now because it's strategic and we have to have it. Well, they already have by agreements with Denmark and Greenland to have a huge military base there. So I don't really understand what they're talking about strategically. It's dumb.
Yeah.
Anyways, we could beat the U.S. because we got Panama and Greenland and Canada. It's 3 against 1.
All right, let's go. Well, he wants everything between Greenland and Panama, basically.
Well, he doesn't want Mexico. He wants up to the borders of Mexico.
Yeah, but if he took
Mexico, then there would be millions and millions of
Mexico. If he controls Mexico, yeah, but again, if he controls Mexico, he moves the problem south to Panama. He moves the immigration problem south to Panama.
No, because everybody in Mexico wants to live in the United States. So if they
will live in the United States, they don't have to move to do that.
Well,
that plan.
The fact is, they will move. They will move into the more prosperous areas of the United States. That's why he wants to erase the artificial line called the border between Canada and the U.S., but he does not want to erase the artificial line between Mexico and the United States, because if he does that, then they'll have millions of Mexicans moving into the more prosperous areas of the United States.
Well, let me just put something up there and we'll move on after this one. Do you recall Germany taking Alsace-Lorraine, Germany taking Austria, Germany taking the Sudetenland, etc., etc.? Any flashback recollections?
Well, that was the Nazis doing that. But Karen Fraser says what? What did she say?
Trump was involved in the NAFTA agreement. He has to. Has he thrown that out? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the irony of this whole thing. He's complaining vehemently how we've taken advantage of him, and it was his own agreement that we're working on.
Oh, yeah, I know.
It's the USMCA agreement, the United States Mexico Canada agreement, which he retitled NAFTA. And that was his agreement that his team negotiated. And now he's not happy with it. Anyway, a lot of this is deflection, because this is typical of of a leader like him. He's made all these promises to the United States, the American people about this or that, and then he deflects that. He was talking about tax reduction and all these other things that he's going to do. But right away, he's beginning to deflect and change the narrative all over again. Like he suspects very, very much that he can't make any of his promises, or many of the promises that he's made to the U.S. people. So he deflects it. He's beginning to tell them, okay, we got to go and take Greenland, we got to take Canada, we got to take Panama, all these things. He's sort of changing the narrative so people can't hold him to the promises he made, because he said, well, the conditions are over now. We're in dispute with Panama, Canada, and Greenland. Typical. It's typical BS.
Okay, let's move on to another one that's related. Trump will bring crisis, but he lacks the guts to stage a coup. Now, this has been brought on. This was actually a thing that you gave us from the Hamilton Spectator. But in looking at this, it also is related to an article that was published in the Korea Times about rogue presidents, talking about their own one, and other newspapers that were also talking about rogue presidents, and particularly also linking that back to that attempted coup way back.
Yeah, this is actually I can't bring it up again because it's on the Hamilton Spectator, but I do remember reading it a little while ago. Yeah, so this is basically a Gwynne Dyer article, is it not?
And I can't see the actual article. I can't actually get those Spectator articles up.
Well, actually, when I transferred it, I transferred the last bunch of articles incorrectly, because they also show up in the Niagara Falls Review, but their source is from the Hamilton Spec. So if I'm not careful of how I copy it to you, it'll come up Spec instead of Niagara Falls Review. So I'll see if I can find it.
No, anyway, I also don't see, at the moment, I've got no Niagara Falls Review.
Oh, well, get it. It's cheap.
I am going to get it back again, but something went wrong with my subscription and I need to get it back again. But I've been surviving throughout the last, basically it occurred just before Christmas. I need to get it back, sort it out and get it back again when I've got some time on my hands.
Simple phone call will fix that up for you.
Yeah.
Because I had a problem once with it too, and I gave them a phone call and it got fixed pretty quick.
Oh, I hadn't thought about calling them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I could do that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we can move on from that if you don't actually have access to it.
Yeah. Basically, what he was saying there is that people are worried about him becoming a dictator, and what Gwynne Dyer did there is he related it to what was happening in South Korea.
Yeah.
Followed that the president there was trying to gain more dictatorial powers for himself, and but what Dyer says is it's not as easy as you think to become a dictator, and it takes a lot of efforts. And he said Trump really doesn't have the guts to do it. I think he would if he could.
Basically, South Korea's Yoon Suk Yeol, who was elected 2 years ago with the slimmest margin ever, made a declaration of martial law on December 3rd, which was withdrawn after 3 hours when thousands of civilians went to the National Assembly building and helped lawmakers convene inside and vote to cancel the president's decree.
Yeah, so I'm trying to find out. I actually have Gwynne Dyer is a pretty good pretty good author.
Hang on,
I used to read him.
Let me give you the Career Times review on the article, which is a Gwyn Dyer article.
Yes. Okay. So it is a Gwyn Dyer article, and I used to read him quite.
No, I had that one in the side, and I just wasn't sure because I wasn't even sure that they were related until I looked at it and saw that it was by Gwyn Dyer. All right. Okay. They tried to. Okay. So basically he's talking about a lot of what happened with Korea's Yoon Suk Yeol, and trying to relate that in relation to Donald Trump.
Yeah. Basically, this didn't work out too good, and remember that the South Korea was a military dictatorship. Throughout the 80s, basically, well, throughout its most of its time, and it only transitioned towards a democracy, I think, in the 90s. So it's a very young.
That's my recollection of it as well. Because even after the Korea War, it was still largely a dictatorship. I think that they had democracy at local levels for a period of time, much more before they actually had a national democracy.
Well, the point here is that it should be much more vulnerable, having very not too long ago being a military dictatorship. But we find that this fella cannot go ahead with what he wants to do and sort of get more dictatorial powers in his hands. Now he's been impeached a couple times. They've tried to arrest him. He's got to go, but he did try. And if Trump tries that in the United States, he'll probably have a lot of followers, but he'll have a lot of resistance even within his own party.
Well, yeah, and the question here is exactly, there's a lot of lawmakers in the Senate and in the House of Representatives that are dedicated to making sure that yes, that they believe in their policy, they believe in their their party's position on everything, but they also believe in the American Constitution.
Yeah. The number one issue here is he has to control the military completely. He can control the military somewhat by putting people of his own choice into those positions, but he cannot control it completely. And if he cannot control the military completely, him becoming a dictator is not possible, really.
I know there's a lot of
regardless of the kind of resistance he's going to have by lawmakers. Now, remember, he only got half the vote in the United States. I mean, he won the popular vote by 1.6%. What does that tell you? That nearly half the voters were against him, no matter, even though it's first past the post type of thing there as well. He only got a couple 100,000 votes, or 300,000 or 400,000 votes more than the opposition. Well,
Karen makes an interesting point here. She thinks he's throwing this out so that everybody forgets about January 6th. That was the anniversary of his insurrection.
Sure, he's going to make a lot of noise like that. The real tragedy is that people that are now working for him that despised him for that, like McConnell and Vance, both despised him for that, now are taking his narrative and pretending that it didn't happen or it wasn't as bad as it was.
Yeah,
that's a real indication of what kind of man this guy is. He inspired these rioters, and they were gonna, and then now saying, oh, it was just some tourists getting out ahead.
Yeah, no. I don't think anybody believes that. All right, let's move on. Let's move on from this. I like these kind of things when you put them up. The
Well, I was going to save that for Science Friday, basically.
Yeah, let's change of pace. Ancient Greek philosopher Nicomachus had a theorem of the perfect square. And basically, the year 2025 is the perfect square of 45. It's a sum of all the numbers that add up to 89, the sum of the numbers 1 through 9 cubed, the square of 1 through 9 added, and the fact that 2025 is the solution to all of those formulas means it completely fulfills his theory.
Yeah, he way back he's had the theory of squares, basically a theorem of the perfect square, and this year, of course, 2045 is the square of 45.
Yeah,
but we're not going to get another square a year.
Well, the last time this happened was 1936, the square of 44.
Yes, but it's going to be a long time before we get the next one, because next one is the square of I think
46.
in 3025. So,
Yeah.
which means we won't see another year like this until the millennium passes in 3035.
Wow.
Ah, man. We have to wait that long? Holy smokes. But I'll be glad to see it.
How come that would be case? If you do 46 by 46, it's 2116.
Let's see. The first discovered by the ancient Greek philosopher Nicomachus of Gerasa, the theory states that the sum of the first odd number and subsequent ones always equals a perfect square.
Okay.
Theory indicates
the
that
even numbers do not. Okay.
Yeah.
So 47 won't come around until 3025. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the year 2116 is the square of 46, but because it's not an odd number, it's not perfect. Gotcha.
Yeah, so always equals a perfect square. Odd numbers always equal a perfect square. The theorem indicates that adding consecutive numbers and squaring the result will yield a perfect square. Additionally, the sum of cubing all odd numbers in a sequence beginning with 1 equals the same perfect square. Well, it can't be perfect square, it'd be perfect cube, wouldn't it? It's relatively simple theory, but one that demonstrates a unique, fascinating, and elegant relationship between numbers. 2025 is one of the few numbers that interacts with the formulas contained within the ancient Greek philosopher's theorem.
Yeah.
There you have it. And it then goes on to talk about other mathematical peculiarities of 2025. So not only is everybody saying that the year 2025 will be a real game changer in world history, it seems to have even have its own mathematical peculiarities, which makes it unique.
Yeah.
On the top of being the first year to fulfill Nicomachean theorem in the millennium, it also fulfills some other mathematical rarities. 2025 is an odd refractorable number, which means it is divisible in all of its divisors. Wow. 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 18, that kind of thing. That would be for 18. So, holy smokes. I think this gets a bit deep here, but it's an interesting article. And you can find this article on the Greek Reporter. Look up the Greek Reporter, and 2025 proves the theorem of ancient Greek philosopher Nicomachus. However, he's not the ancient Greek philosopher that we think of, Golden Age of Greece. He came up with this in 1296. So as far as Greek history is concerned, that's not that long ago.
He's he's actually a fairly new guy then.
Yeah, he would have been under the Byzantines.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I find those kind of things a bit fascinating. I'm not sure I fully understand. Yes, I get the maths. It's fairly easy to work out. I'm not sure the value of it, but still.
The value of his relationship with numbers, and when mathematicians do that kind of thing, they learn things about numbers and how they relate to the universe as a whole, basically, in our functioning here.
But what I'm saying about of the value of it's fascinating, it's interesting, it's a great thing to talk about for a little while, but it doesn't impact the economy of Canada, for example.
No, but some smart algorithmic type of person may be able to take aspects of that and to be able to predict economic futures. Who knows?
We could probably build, if you combine it with crisis theory, you could probably build a beautiful picture, as based upon, certain ranges making certain colors.
Possibly, but remember the Pythagorean theorem when it came out, it was just kind of a curiosity, but it worked out to be very valuable in science and architecture and so on. And so this kind of thing may help architects or engineers or something like that.
That's where it's gonna have its real impact. And it might well be something like this, which is actually this is how the pyramids were formed. But Karen's saying too deep for her.
Yeah, I was going to save it for Science Friday and kind of simplify it, but Peter wants.
Well, no, I actually like these as a diversion along what we're doing. Sometimes we get very deep into some very serious subjects here. And so sometimes we actually need to change the pace a little bit. All right.
Yeah.
Particularly as the next article is going quite deep again. Right.
Okay.
Because Canada's immigration debate has helped seal Trudeau's fate, according to the BBC.
Yeah, I picked this one from the BBC because it's a foreign English language news, and it has the outside looking in type of approach that we seem to quite often not be able to see the forest for the trees when we are living in that situation. Somebody from the outside looking in quite often has a better perspective, a more sort of objective perspective. Now this is another thing we've talked about constantly, our immigration woes, and the BBC has pretty much analyzed it from the outside looking in. I don't think we have to, and they say basically that it may not be the first thing that destroyed Trudeau, but it was definitely a significant factor. The Liberals and Trudeau are being eroded within, and it has to do with their policies. And one of the major ones was immigration and how poorly they handled it. So this is a view from the outside looking in. And that, I think, is what makes it valuable.
Well, the one thing they're talking about is like a single room for rent for $550 in Brampton, which is basically a bathroom with a bed in it, right?
Yes, the irony of it is we have an enormous country, unpopulated. We have lots of room. We have lots of resources, all those things we have, and yet we have to pay $2,000 for a modified bathroom per month in places just to live. It is contradictory to have a nation like Canada, as wealthy as it is, completely full of resources, wood, lumber, steel, concrete, all those other things, and yet we cannot house our own people.
Yeah.
And that is basically what the outside looking in can see.
Yeah.
And that's remarkably, most of that problem is because of the inefficient and ill-founded immigration system. As Pepe has constantly said, immigration was just fine up until 2015 when Trudeau got in. And then all of a sudden it exploded, and we were no longer able to keep, no longer allowed to, able to accommodate as many people as brought in.
Yeah.
It's just like if you like sugar in your coffee. Let's say if you like sugar in your coffee, someone says, "Here, sugar in your coffee tastes good." Well, the liberal says, "Well, if that's good, we'll fill the cup up with sugar." Right?
Yeah.
You know what
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So it's no
Absolutely.
longer any good. So you have to get
And
the right
again,
balance.
we have to point out that in this context, the question about immigration is not one of being racist at all.
No, that doesn't even come up anymore. But
Yeah.
when originally, when the opposition parties were complaining about the rate of immigration, they were told that they were racists.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't get that anymore, because every time they do that, they bring up Trudeau's blackface. If you've ever noticed that, anytime they try to tell the conservatives that they're racist or they have ethnic phobia of some kind, the first thing they'll fight back with is, Justin Trudeau and his blackface. So the liberals have lost one of their weapons they like to use against the conservatives. They like to call them racists and misogynists and everything else.
And I don't believe the concern about immigration isn't racial based at all.
No, it isn't, and it never was.
Yeah.
It never was. When people complain about perhaps the kind of,
and like I said even earlier on today, when you've got a job crisis, you don't let more people immigrate. You kind of go, "Hey, stop a minute,"
Yeah, they just do not govern well. They like I said before, oh, it's good to have coffee in your sugar. So guess what? We're going to fill the whole cup up with sugar and pour a little coffee on top of it. Yeah, that would become slush, and but that's what they think. I remember when I was in Libya, people who back then, the locals who were very not yet educated and all that, if medicine was good, if one pill was good, then six must be better. So that's what Canada does. Says, oh, immigration is good for Canada, so let's double it. That just didn't work because I don't know. And Betty Zoom says hi. Chris missed. I can't find that article that I posted, by the way, the BBC one.
Yeah, you
Does
can't.
it go back away?
Pardon me?
Does it go back away?
No, don't think so. Hang on, let me just send it to you now. I don't think it goes back away.
I don't know why. Like, I know I posted it, but that's basically the reality of that situation. Is just it's really good to have an outside looking in perspective. Karen Fraser says, I knew our foreign trade workers numbered around 100,000 per year, but I did not know that their spouses were part of the equation. Yeah, you see, if somebody in Ottawa, somebody who hasn't had real life experiences say, oh, why do we let them bring their spouses in? Then wouldn't that be so nice? Well, nobody figures on the costs and the ramifications of that. They just think, oh, because it's a really good idea, that it's fine. It sounds good. It's just malarkey. But we'll see going forward. the liberals have even themselves had changed, and they had to come up and said, well, immigration is good, but what the Trudeau says, we just didn't get the numbers right. We have to adjust them. Well, they didn't get the numbers right from 2015 on, and that's the problem. They just don't understand. They're unfortunately for our government workers, they all live in nice places, and their resources are all there for them, and so they think, oh well, guess what? We'll give this stuff all away. We'll bring on all these refugees or whatever else. We'll bring thousands of students in. And as I said before, when I talk to people who come to Canada, what are they taking? They're taking, like fluff stuff like tourist management or anything that they could qualify for, they get in. And they're not really places where you're going to get jobs.
Yeah. And but BBC is right in stating that immigration helped seal Trudeau's fate.
Oh yeah, it was a major factor. So it's a major factor because Canadians, for the first time in decades, actually probably since the end of the war, have approved of immigration, and have approved of immigration up until just a few years ago, when it became very clear to the average Canadian that one of the major reasons why we have a housing shortage and healthcare crisis is because we have too many people coming into the country and taxing all those resources.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, typically, I think it's just simply logical that when you've got a situation whereby you've got a recession on, you close the doors on immigration temporarily. You can immigrate when you've got good years. You can't immigrate when you've got bad years.
Well, that was one of the reasons why they boosted immigration, was to stimulate the economy.
Yeah,
and
I don't think it does.
Well, it does artificially, because the new people coming into the country start spending money. But if
they can't get a job, that money is only temporary spend.
Yeah, it's a temporary fix. Plus, if you look at the GDP per capita, we find that the Canadian citizens has less to spend. But if you bring in 1.3 million people and they're spending, so it artificially looks as if the economy is not doing as badly as it is, because you have a whole lot of new people coming in and initially spending a fair amount of money. But if you look at the GDP to per capita ratio, ours is going down compared to the other G7 countries.
Well, when I came in, I was fortunate that I had money to buy a house. So it probably looked quite healthy when I put money into buying that house.
So you're the problem. Things got worse after you came here.
But but not everybody was in the same situation I was.
Well,
certainly not refugees, that's for sure.
Yeah, so basically, it's just an unrealistic look that liberals have. I don't think I have a feeling that when the election finally does come, that the liberals will be eviscerated, and they'll just be completely wiped off the face of the map, and we'll have conservative governments for the next 8 years. But and I think that's going to happen in Ontario too. I think we're going to have a very long conservative government in Ontario. I don't think Ford has to worry about having a spring election. I think his stance right now, his ability to get out there, and there is an article here where the Ford government is trying to fast track some nukes, and
we'll get to that.
Yeah,
I'm hoping we get to that tomorrow.
Well, okay, we will, but it's 8:03 a.m.
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
and I have a meeting later on, so I got to scram.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough. Absolutely. So, Dave?
Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace.